everybody, and welcome to IMI's Talking Leadership podcast. I'm Mary Malloy. I'm the marketing manager here at IMI, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Professor David Denyer. David is a professor of leadership and organisational change at Cranfield School of Management, where he's been based since 2002. He's a leading expert in systems, resilience and change, and he works closely with executive teams operating in complex, highly regulated environments. Many of our members will also know David from his work on IMI's Senior Executive Experience Programme. So we've invited David onto the podcast today ahead of his upcoming IMI virtual mini masterclass on the 10th of March. It's titled Organisational Resilience, Thriving Through Turbulence. Over the course of that session, David will be exploring what organisational resilience really looks like in practice, from spotting risks and vulnerabilities early to coordinating responses across the organisation and building the kind of adaptability that helps organisations not just survive disruption, but come out stronger. Before we get into that, though, we wanted to take the opportunity to get to know David and his thinking a little bit better. So, David, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. Okay. So we have a few questions that we'll put to you today, just to give people a bit of a flavour of what they can expect at the mini masterclass in a couple of weeks. So we've mentioned that you've had many years with Cranfield School of Management and you have time facilitating IMI programs as well. With all of that experience, when you hear leaders say, yep, we're resilient, what are they usually mistaking for resilience? What do they think they know, but they don't?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good start point. I think whenever I hear someone say that we're really resilient, I think that's when I start to kind of have some concerns, because I think resilience is one of those things that is an ongoing process in an organization, and almost the point of saying like we've achieved resilience is maybe the point that you stop learning, you stop improving, stop moving towards it. I don't think in a dynamic environment that every organization faces now, with the new emerging risks all the time, changes in global politics, changes in technology, changes in consumer demands, that we can ever say we've achieved resilience, because we continuously need to adapt to a constantly changing environment. And I think that's the essence of resilience. I think when people think about resilience, you generally very often you go into thinking resilience is about stopping bad stuff happening, or resilience is bouncing back from disruptions and kind of stressful, difficult situations. But actually, resilience is about change. It's about adapting to your environment. So my view of resilience is much more like an evolutionary view of resilience. It's about fitness for the environment. It's about change before you have to change or you're forced to change. So for me, resilience is about change. It's not just about prevention, control, bouncing back from things.
And with that, with all of the constant change and the constant resilience that is needed to be successful these days in any kind of business, do you think that it's something that you can teach? Are people just innately, they have it in them that they're resilient? Is it something with the nature nurture kind of debate on it? If you have resilient family members, do you learn it from them? If you've got an organization that's really good at managing it, is it something that becomes innate? Is it something that you see people can learn and develop?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things in what you're raising there, because I think you've got a difference between individual resilience. So are we looking at individual leaders and personal resilience? And there's a whole, body of work around how to be resilient as an individual. And then the bit that I particularly look at is around organizational resilience and how you build an organization that's more adaptable, more agile for its environment. And those two things go hand in hand. You can't have an organization that's resilient without resilient individuals, and vice versa. Now, back to the question around, is it something kind of innate or a trait or a characteristic or an attribute? I don't think it is. I think resilience in both cases is a capability. It's something you do, not something you have. So some people would think about resilient as a state to achieve. And you say, like, I've got this level of resilience. Whereas for me, resilience is about the building a capability. It's what you do, and it's what you build the ability to be able to continue to do as you move forward. So Just to help people that might be listening in on this, so just to give a sort of very practical analogy. So resilience is really like personal health. And it's really difficult if I said to you, are you healthy? To say,
Scales.
here's a measure. Yeah, here's a
Mm,
measure of health. But actually, there's lots of indicators of what a healthy person has. And you can go and get one of these kind of personal health scans, and you can kind of get
sure.
all of your measures. But all of that is in relation to what you want to achieve as an individual. So what you might regard as kind of fitness, and I talked about fitness for the environment. If fitness for an individual is, being able to take the dog for a walk, it's very different to if fitness means I want to win at the Winter Olympics in,
Sure. Yeah.
an event. So resilience is always relative to what the organization's trying to do and the situation that the organization's in. So and I've worked with lots of different organizations, if I'm working, say, with Netflix, they're going to have a very different need around resilience to if I'm working with a nuclear power station.
Of course.
And so resilience, how you think about resilience is determined by what you are trying to achieve as an organization. And this part, I think, is really critical because some people coming on the masterclass might be thinking that resilience is something really technical. It's often associated with risk management or business continuity or disaster recovery. As soon as you start looking at a more progressive notion of resilience, not just like a defensive stopping stuff, but how do we achieve what we want to achieve this time, next time, every time? It becomes much more strategic because then it becomes about how do we achieve our purpose? How do we deliver against our mission? And that notion of resilience being relative to what you're trying to achieve makes, for me, resilience a really strategic imperative. It becomes something that is crucial for leaders and leadership teams to consider, because it's not just sort of something that we park and go like we've done resilience, like kind of we sometimes do with risk management. Like we look at threats to the organization, we categorize them in terms of probability, consequence, and have a conversation around our risk appetite. But then that conversation kind of gets parked on the risk register. Whereas resilience is something that's much more strategic. It's about what's the most important things that this organization needs to deliver. How does it define what's essential? What if we don't deliver it? What are those things that are going to have the biggest impact on our customer, on our end user? So therefore, what do we need to build resilience into? Which is another core strategic element that I'll talk about on the masterclass, because not everything in an organization has to have the same level of resilience.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we've got limited resources, time, money, people, where are we going to put those resources to have the biggest impact on improving the resilience of the organization? Again, it's a strategic conversation.
That all makes total sense. And at the risk of an organization drowning in risk analysis, to go back to the example of I can go and get my health check done, and I know, okay, there's a warning sign there, there's a check engine light going on somewhere. That's very easy to do on a personal level, but on an organizational level, do you have any insights or tips for people who are looking for those vulnerabilities to try and catch them before they become a problem?
Yeah, and this is where, and again on the masterclass, I'll talk about this. There's a big difference for me between risk-based thinking and resilience thinking. So back to our health analogy here, you might look at what's the risk in the future of an individual getting cancer or dementia or some other, illness. And with that risk-based view, we are looking at defined threats or defined risks and the extent to which they might materialize. And then we put controls in place for those defined risks. That's, the established approach that we use across every sector and every walk of life, that we look at risk in that way. Resilience asks a different question. it asks the question, if any of those risks materialize, how resilient is the organization? So, or in that, back to our analogy, whether it's cancer or it's heart disease or it's something else that a person has or is inflicted with in the future, the resilience question is, can I build my general resilience in order that if any of those things materialize, I can continue to operate and I can continue to function and have a life that I want to lead. And back to the organizational example, an organization might be disrupted by a power supply issue, a supply chain issue, a cyber attack. And it's not, resilience isn't looking at each of those individual risks and what do we do. That's risk-based thinking. The resilience-based view is, assume now that you have been disrupted, can we continue to deliver what's most important? And that's the resilience and the kind of difference between risk and resilience.
You mentioned there about a cyber attack, and I think it's something that is, it's on everybody's minds. We hear about terrible, awful things happening to poor, unfortunate people who just click a wrong link and then things can go very badly wrong. Is there one capability that you see is missing when that disruption hits? Is there something that, I don't know, part of your risk analysis people should have a plan for to help keep that resilient organization going?
Yeah, so there's kind of two elements to the answer, really. Is whenever you look at something materializing, so a cyber incident on the organization, you can look to sort of look forward and say how are we going to respond to it, and what are the better ways in which we can limit the impact of it if it materializes. The other way is you look backwards and say, well, have we built the organization that can stop this happening in the first place? Back to your point about a kind of any single capability, either one of those you look at, there's often a very strong human and cultural element to any threat event materializing, including cyber incidents. So how the organization in the run up to an incident or the ability to stop an incident often requires people that are able to notice the issue, to respond to the issue really quickly, which becomes more a behavioral and cultural issue. And resilience isn't just about systems and processes, it's also about people's behavior, culture of the organization, and it's the same afterwards. You can have all of the backup systems, but things often fall through the seams or the interfaces between different parts of the business. So for me, the core element through all of this, and if there's one thing to focus on, it is around individuals and it's about culture. And resilience for me is not about putting another system, another process in place, but actually building a culture of resilience. People asking what if, what next, people noticing problems, people having the psychological safety to be able to speak up about issues and challenges, people being empowered so if they notice a problem they can trap it early rather than it kind of cascading through the system. So in terms of resilience and to focus on a core capability, for me, it is that cultural element. Have you got the right culture? And we see so often in organizations where if you haven't got the right behavior, you haven't got the right culture, the organization kind of sleepwalks into failure because it doesn't even notice the problems that it's not attending to. And people aren't able to speak up, things aren't attended to. And the problem we've got is that so many of these issues, they build up over time. Lots of small things go wrong. They cascade through the system. And then we look back and we're kind of surprised that it happened. And that's because we haven't got the kind of right mindset and the right culture around it.
If there was something that you could implement, so you'd have organizations where certain departments might manage risk really well, they might be very resilient, they might have a great leader, they might just have a solid team who've been there for quite a while and they've seen it all, they've dealt with everything. Their team is doing fine. We don't want them in a silo, they're working cross-functionally. So is there something